It'll give you the get up and go you need to do all the pathetic stuff you have to do. Try new improved Buzz Cola.
Cola. Must get Buzz Cola.
Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. So today is the 20-year anniversary of the Simpsons Hit and Run. This game is a childhood favourite of mine. I can remember getting it for my birthday as a kid, and being practically obsessed with it. With the game being 20 years old now, I figured it would be the perfect time to give it a proper, in-depth retrospective review, so let's get started. The game is often considered a spiritual successor to The Simpsons Road Rage, which was another driving-based Simpsons game, released a couple years earlier. That game was basically Crazy Taxi, with a Simpsons paint job. Speaking of Simpsons paint jobs, one thing you will notice right off the bat about Hit and Run, is that it's very reminiscent of the Grand Theft Auto series. In fact, when the game first came out, it was generally considered by critics to essentially be Grand Theft Auto, with a Simpsons paint job. And I suppose to some extent that's true, but at the same time, I think simply calling it a GTA clone is selling it a little bit short, because despite some of the obvious similarities to GTA, the game in its own right, while flawed, is still a lot of fun in my opinion. Playing the game all these years later, however, I wasn't sure if it would still hold up today, so does it? Let's talk about it. So the game is a semi-open world, third-person action-adventure platformer with driving mechanics, based of course on the Simpsons TV series. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the Simpsons TV series. I think it's really overrated actually. But despite that, I always had a soft spot for this game. Another thing you'll notice about the game right away is that there's an air of authenticity about it, with most of the original cast of the show lending their voices and reprising their roles. If you happen to be a fan of the show, you'll appreciate this. The reason I call the game semi-open world is because the game is split up into 7 different levels, each of them being their own large sandbox, consisting of a particular area of Springfield. There are 5 playable characters, each with their own level. These characters are Homer of course, Bart, Lisa, Marge, and Apu.
This is just between me and you, random object.
Yeah, why they chose Apu as a playable character I have no idea, but I kinda like it. It sucks that they never let you play as Flanders though, that would have been awesome, but I digress.
Flanders, look! I found your missing stuff! Now, about the reward.
Thanks, neighbor Rooney. Here's your reward. A prayer from the Lord's #1 fan. Our Father in heaven, bless this noble oaf.
Stupid Flanders getting happiness from religion.
I mentioned there are 7 levels. Bart and Homer have 2 levels each, so you essentially play as them twice. The story of the game is a pretty bizarre one, even by Simpsons standards. Mysterious vans as well as camera-wielding wasps have been sighted all over Springfield, and Homer believes they are watching him. In addition to that, a new brand of soda called New and Improved Buzz Cola has been released, being promoted by Krusty the Clown.
Hey, I'm endorsing a new cola, kids. And this one isn't poisonous to anybody.
That we know of.
It turns out the aliens, Kodos and Kang, have returned to Earth and are planning to use this Buzz Cola to zombify the population of Springfield to increase ratings for their intergalactic television show.
Kodos, look at these space ratings for foolish Earthlings.
What happened, Kang? Foolish Earthlings used to be the #1 reality show in the galaxy.
Yeah, as I said, it's a bizarre plot even for Simpsons standards. As far as the overall gameplay goes, it focuses primarily on driving. Like the GTA series, you approach a mission starting point and are given a task by an NPC. These tasks will usually consist of you having to drive to a certain point, to collect a particular item, or follow a particular vehicle. For example, one of the early missions in the game sees Homer simply drive to the Quickie Mart to pick up the groceries for Marge. Simplicity itself. As the game progresses, however, these missions and tasks get increasingly more difficult, and more convoluted. What helps in this regard is that the driving mechanics are absolutely fantastic. Unlike in some of the GTA games where the driving is quite janky at times, pretty much everything in this game is fast paced and hectic, and it never feels in any way sluggish or unresponsive. Some missions will have you try to reach a certain point within a time limit, others will have a set number of collectibles you have to find, some of them will have you race another vehicle. You even have some vehicular combat sections, where you basically have to bash into another vehicle to destroy it, or knock items off the back of it to collect them. What's strange about this game is that a lot of the missions do seem to repeat, but somehow the game itself never really feels repetitive to me, and as far as I'm concerned it always feels fresh throughout. This is probably mostly due to the fact that the game has a huge variety of different vehicles to unlock and use, some of which you gain automatically as part of the story, others you can buy from a designated car dealer.
Ooh, the fresh air is somewhat confusing.
Yeah, you're gonna buy a car?
Some missions in the game will actually require you to first purchase and acquire one of these vehicles, giving you an incentive to acquire as many of them as possible. Speaking of cars, you basically have every single car that ever made an appearance on the show, and then some. Each playable character and even some of the NPCs will have their own personal car. For example, Homer starts with the Simpsons family sedan, which is of course iconic. Bart even has the honor roller from that one episode, showing that the developers had a passion for the show and wanted to include as much content from it as possible. Again, fans of the show will probably appreciate this. You'll also get some classics such as Mr. Plow, the Plow King, the Book Burning Van, or my personal favourite, the Hover Bike. Yeah, the Hover Bike is awesome. Once a car has been unlocked or purchased, you can summon it by activating one of the many phone boxes around the levels. Here you basically call up for a ride and you get your car delivered to you immediately. What's cool about this too is that sometimes if the car is owned by another character, that character will be in the car waiting for you. Provided of course that that character doesn't make an appearance somewhere else in that particular level.
Saturn's rings, an away mission.
I need your help. My car is, sleeping.
Okay. My latex dummy should cover for me in my absence.
Man, this game actually has some continuity. Who would have thought? Purchasing every car does take a while, but it's worth it in the end. In addition to the designated cars, you can also hitch a ride with any of the game's randomly generated NPCs. Yeah, unlike in GTA, you can't actually carjack them. You basically just sit in the passenger seat and assume direct control of the vehicle. I kinda like this, it's pretty funny to see. In addition to all these cars, each of the game's levels will have a secret hidden car somewhere. Again, these are usually based on cars that were featured in one episode. For example, the monorail, the rocket car, a monster truck, a quad bike, a boat that drives on land, a remote control car, and even Hans Moleman's car. Remember that? Again, these can be quite fun to find, though it's a shame you can't summon them in any level like you can with the other cars that you bought. You can only use them in the levels you find them in. Some vehicles are incredibly fast but have poor handling. Likewise, some are much slower but have great handling. Others have a good balance between the two. Some are more durable than others, and therefore more useful for the vehicular combat sections. Others are much weaker and will blow up on impact. Each car will have its own stats presented in the phone box, where you get a little menu before selecting them. If your car gets destroyed, you lose a bunch of coins and the car becomes unusable.
That was so painful.
You can pay to fix your car at a phone box. This is pretty cheap. In addition to this, you can actually find wrenches scattered around the game that will automatically fix the car you're currently using. This is a good way to save coins. It's funny to see a car go from bashed up to brand new in a split second, but I digress. In addition to the driving, the game also has plenty of platforming, as well as a little bit of combat. The platforming mechanics are actually really solid for the time. The controls are smooth and fluid, the camera is competent and doesn't get in your way much. And the level design is fantastic in my opinion. The levels themselves are also really fun to explore and jump around in. Several of the game's missions will actually require you to do some platforming to reach a particular area or collect some items. These sections are usually pretty easy. One or two of them are a bit frustrating though.
If you're so smart, how come I broke you? Not like anyone likes these things.
I mentioned the game has combat. You can basically kick any NPC around the level, and they will never hit you back, even if you spend all day kicking them around and basically ragdolling them. It's quite bizarre watching Homer kick the absolute crap out of Marge before even doing the first mission, and she just acts with mild concern.
Yeah!
How rude! Stranger danger!
An older boy told me to do it.
The only real challenge you have in regards to combat is the flying wasps with cameras. These wasps will shoot you as you approach them, and this will cause you to lose your coins. You will have to jump kick them to defeat them. Speaking of coins, these act as currency for the game. I mentioned earlier that you can purchase vehicles. You do this by collecting coins scattered around the levels. Many of these will simply be lying around in predetermined locations. Others will be in vending machines that you have to smash open, as well as Buzz Cola crates. These give you loads of coins. In addition to these, you can gain coins by defeating the flying wasps. Again, these contain many coins. You also get a large amount of coins by simply interacting with the game's environment. This can be as simple as destroying public property such as lampposts or mailboxes, or even interacting with specific curiosities. Throughout the levels there will be funny gags to interact with, usually containing some kind of reference to the show. Some of these are pretty funny too.
Silent alarm activated. Silent alarm activated.
Another collectible you have in the game is the collector's cards.
It's like a game.
There are 7 collector's cards hidden around each level. Most of them are relatively easy to find, though some of them are quite well hidden. Some of them require you to do some platforming to find and acquire, giving you an incentive to explore as much of the game as possible to try to find them. What's cool about this too is that by finding them all, and taking them to the comic book store, you can unlock a secret new Itchy and Scratchy episode at the theatre. This is awesome. They really didn't need to add this, but I'm glad they did. Be sure to search everywhere in the levels to find these. I actually had a blast exploring the levels since I would often run into a gag or a reference that I wasn't previously aware of, and there are plenty of secret areas to find. In addition to all this, the game also has many side activities to take part in, including street races. You can find them all over the place. These races are a lot of fun and some of them are actually quite challenging. It's important to find the right vehicle to suit each particular race. These are entirely optional, but can be useful for unlocking new content. Speaking of unlockable content, you can also purchase alternative costumes for each of the characters. Again, these consist of outfits that were featured in the show. Some of them will even be necessary to progress in the game, with certain missions requiring you to use a particular costume. You can buy these alternative costumes at designated points around the level, and I really appreciate this. It helps to make the game more varied and less repetitive. Another thing I love about the game is the level and location variety. Each of the game's levels, as I mentioned earlier, cover a particular part of Springfield, and these all look great. You get the residential part of town where the Simpsons live. You get the docks and the beach area. You also get downtown, and each of these levels look very different from one another, and very unique. Some of these areas do get reused however. For example, the residential area gets used 3 times, however each time there are some noteworthy changes, such as the weather and overall theme. The final level, for example, is a Treehouse of Horror theme. These were of course the Halloween themed episodes of the show, again something I'm sure fans of the show will appreciate. The game also has some really funny dialogue and jokes throughout.
Strike 1. Counterfeit designer jeans. The foulest of all crimes. Strike 2. Running over an elderly person without a license.
Oh, my.
It's weird, I actually found this game so much funnier than the show itself. So that pretty much sums up what the game has to offer. It's a semi-open world sandbox, reminiscent of several open world sandbox games of the time, that has a lot to offer, with some incredible driving mechanics, and for the most part it's a lot of fun. I do have some criticisms though. For starters, the graphics and presentation are pretty lackluster for 2003. Though I do like the game's cutscenes, they have a nice, almost self-shaded look to them, and I actually really like the way they look personally. But yeah, the in-game graphics are extremely dated. And the game has quite a lot of technical issues, including clipping and collision detection problems, frame rate issues, and some absolutely atrocious AI. Seriously, the AI during some of the missions is extremely frustrating, and the game had a habit of clipping me through walls and getting me stuck. To be fair though, sometimes it was pretty funny.
Oh, the guilt!
And there are even some exploits you can take advantage of here and there. The game also has terrible difficulty spikes here and there, particularly late in the game, and some of these have a habit of making players rage quit, and I don't blame anybody who does. Many of the game's missions have a time limit, and for the most part the game is relatively forgiving, with a little bit of room for error. However, in the later stages of the game, some of these time limits are a pain in the ass, clearly being designed to pad out the game. It seems like the developers knew this, because they added a feature where you can skip missions if you fail a certain amount of times, and this is greatly appreciated, since you can choose to replay the missions at any time, and you can choose to go back and do them if you want to. In my most recent playthrough, I only used this feature once, and I later went back to do the mission legitimately, but I appreciate the feature nonetheless. You can't do this for every mission though. The final mission of the game is extremely hard, and it takes so much trial and error to do. Again, I was able to do it, but it was a bit of a chore to do. I suppose another criticism I could see for the game is that it's a little bit formulaic, but what the game does have to offer is still very enjoyable in my personal opinion. It would have been nice to see maybe some boss battles, or maybe some more platforming sections, since it would have spiced up the game a bit, which I suppose is okay depending on your point of view. Nonetheless, I had an absolute blast playing through the game again, and in many ways it still holds up today. Another little feature you get in the game is a slight multiplayer mode. You basically get a 4-player driving minigame that you can access from the menu. This was pretty fun, so that's something, and it just adds a little bit of extra content to the game. Thanks for watching guys. I give The Simpsons Hit and Run a solid 7 out of 10. It's a great game for the most part, despite a few technical issues and difficulty spikes. And despite being a bit formulaic, I still had a lot of fun with it. I'd recommend it if you're a fan of the show, or if you really like open world sandbox style games, or even driving and racing games. Let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned for more retrospective video game reviews. Once again, I have a lot of reviews coming to the channel in the near future. Thanks for watching and God bless.
Did that really happen? I thought it was a bad dream after eating too many raw hot dogs.
No, homie, you're the town hero.